For this week's Starting Line, I'm Sarah Allen. Studies show that high school graduates earn more money, have more job opportunities, and are less likely to be incarcerated compared to their peers who do not complete high school. The Department of Education says that 79.5% of Minnesota high school seniors graduated in 2013, up from 77.6% in 2012. Representative Carlos Mariani is sponsoring a bill he says would help even more high school students graduate and get their diploma. His bill would increase the compulsory attendance age to 18 with some exceptions. One question I have is, now the legislature in 2013 passed a law that requires Minnesota students to stay in school until age 17, which was a year longer than what was previously in law. Why do you want to increase the compulsory attendance age to 18?
The biggest single reason is because we want to make sure that our laws really reflect the real opportunities and challenges that we have in our society. So if you think about when we had it 16, you're talking about a society that was still influenced by really good opportunities that can exist for very young adults to be able to participate in the workforce. Agricultural society, is a really good example. Folks could leave, work on the farm, make a good living. Perhaps head to the numerous manufacturing plants, that require minimal skills. You can still make a very good living. That's another era. We live in an era where anything short of some level of post-secondary experience really pretty much condemns you as an individual to a life in poverty and very limited opportunities. But it also, quite frankly, condemns our whole society to not being able to push the advantages of modern technology, modern academic thought. The rush globally is to high skills economies. Those who can do very well with that are going to be the more prosperous societies, as opposed to the ones with very low skills. So we want to be able to interact with young people as long as possible in order to help them at least, if not get college credit, because that's not for everyone, but at the very least be able to have some post-secondary exposure to post-secondary rigor of certifications, experiences, etc.
Why do you think keeping students in school until they're 18 will help more graduate?
For most of the viewers here, think about what you were thinking about when you were 15, 16, even 17 years old. We have some great young people in this state, quite capable of thinking very long term, but generally speaking, not so much. And so what we really want, the wisdom of our school system, is that we have a relationship with young people, hopefully long enough so that they can make very super well-informed, mature decisions that are going to impact the rest of their lives. They're going to impact the families that they're eventually going to have in the community. So, quite honestly, it's about being able to have a strong relationship with young people longer, so that we can work with them to make much more informed, mature decisions about what they're going to be doing the rest of their life and how they're going to be able to participate in our economy and in our civic life. And it's not to say that 16 and 15-year-olds can't have that conversation. In fact, we should have that conversation with them. But it's really about making sure that those big ultimate decisions aren't made very hastily, that locks them into, as I said earlier, potentially a lifelong cycle of poverty.
So what are some of the exceptions to your bill?
Well, we have a very strong and healthy homeschool sector in education here. And Minnesota has decided that we're going to allow that space for families to be able to provide that educational experience, and they can make those decisions as a family unit with very, very minimal dependency on public resources, public institutions. So we wanted to be able to respect that in terms of the alternative, because really that is an alternative form of education, the alternative plans that they might have for their students. Quite frankly, I think most of those families are probably providing very good, strong, mature advice within their family members about those long-term decisions. exposing their young people to really good opportunities, and most parents would do that.
What do you see as the drawbacks to your bill, if any, of keeping students in school until they're 18?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, the drawback, quite frankly, is that not all schools are for all students. There's always going to be students for, and I've met them, I've had them in my own family, there's always students for which the main delivery system, a high school, just doesn't work for them. You know, quite frankly, they might be super mature and they just want to get out into the workforce. Of course, the issue is that they're going to get out into the workforce very early with pretty minimal guidance, and that really concerns me. But think about students that are just anxious to get out for whatever reason, and the law comes around and says, no, you got to stick around, you know, until you're 18. So, you know, you're going to have some pushback, you're going to have some, rebellious behavior potentially. It becomes potentially a drag, if you will, in terms of how they perceive their lives, etc. Anger. Quite frankly, I don't want to ignore that. What I want is our schools, our high schools, to then be real sensitive to that, to adapt, to provide flexibility in terms of how they provide education and educational opportunities for those young people, as opposed to just simply said, you know, Carlos is bored here, Carlos is not happy here, he can drop out, he can leave, we'll just let him do it. That's not a very responsible position in my mind from our public institutions. Again, when you couple it with the fact that nothing short of some level of career and college readiness exposure is what that individual needs to be successful and what we need as a society to be successful. So the downside is, you know, perhaps some anger and some pushback on the part of students. The upside, though, is that it really makes it incumbent, calls for these schools to not be places where students are bored, not be places where students feel that they're wasting time, to really, you know, flex their creative scheduling and interaction with these young people. And quite frankly, many of the school districts that I've spoken to feel that they're up to that task.
Can you tell us where your bill is in the legislative process and where you think it will go?
So the bill is very early in the legislative process, right? It'll be moving through policy committees in both the House and the Senate, assuming that, you know, the chairs of those committees offer those hearings. Because this bill does have a fiscal cost, and it's kind of complicated, but bottom line is that if less students are dropping out, then that drives our projections about how much the state needs to appropriate on the formula to be able to cover those costs. So that becomes a financial issue. So the bills then will need to be folded into finance omnibus bills, the K-12 finance omnibus bill, and I would suspect that as opposed to moving alone, that's really the way for the bill to move. And I would expect and I would hope, in the end, just as we did when we passed it in 2017, that it becomes one component inside the big K-12 finance omnibus bill.
Coming up next week, we'll look to see if there's been any movement on Representative Carlos Mariani's bill, and we'll feature a new bill on Starting Line. And remember, hundreds of bills get introduced every legislative session in Minnesota. All of them first have to cross the starting line.